In 2000, the Tennessee Supreme Court silenced the right of the people to enforce reasonable regulation of abortion in our state. We can't require that abortion facilities be licensed or inspected, and so half are not. And there is nothing to prevent courts from imposing mandatory taxpayer funding of abortion. Amendment 1 will restore the voice of Tennesseans to protect women and the unborn. Vote yes on Amendment 1.
Also on the ballots tomorrow, a controversial amendment about abortion. So what does it really mean when you cast a yes or no vote for Tennessee Amendment 1? The clergy weighed in on both sides of the issue, and new at 10, our Mark Bellinger breaks it all down.
Some say politics and religion don't mix. Oh, but they do on Tennessee Amendment 1.
This is not the work we elected our public officials to do. Vote no on Amendment 1.
We urge all who view our press conference today to vote yes in support of Amendment number 1.
Clergy on both sides of the abortion issue held press conferences Tuesday. So what is Amendment 1? You've seen the television ads.
Amendment 1 is just government interference.
Amendment 1 will restore the voice of Tennesseans to protect women and the unborn.
Tennessee lawmakers are asking voters to change the state constitution. The amendment says nothing in the Constitution secures or protects a right to an abortion or requires the funding of an abortion. It lets state lawmakers pass laws regulating abortions. Similar regulations were stricken by the Tennessee Supreme Court 14 years ago when the court cited a woman's right to privacy. A yes vote would let lawmakers pass restrictions, making it harder to get an abortion.
It is the epitome of political interference in our privacy. These decisions belong to women and not to our politicians.
Vanderbilt law professor and Yes on One campaign chair Carol Swain says the amendment does not take away a woman's right to choose.
No state constitutional amendment can trump a Supreme Court decision. And so a woman's right to an abortion, a right to choose, is not being jeopardized by voting yes on 1.
It's a decision to be made by Tennessee voters. Mark Bellinger, News Channel 5 HD.
Gun officials, to gun advocacy groups, to sportsmen and hunters and religious leaders. And I've spoken with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, had extensive conversation with mayors and governors and county officials. And the recommendations we provided to the president on Monday call for executive actions he could sign, legislation he could call for, and long-term research that should be undertaken. They're based on the emerging consensus we heard from all the groups with whom we spoke, including some of you who were the victims of this god-awful occurrence. Ways to keep guns out of the wrong hands, as well as ways to take comprehensive action to prevent violence in the first place. We should do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so some of what you will hear from the president will happen immediately. Some will take some time. But we have begun, and we are starting here today, and we're resolved to continue this fight. During the meetings that we held, we met with a young man who's here today. I think Colin Goddard is here. Where are you, Colin? Colin was one of the survivors of the Virginia Tech massacre. He was in the classroom. He calls himself one of the lucky 7. And he'll tell you he was shot 4 times on that day, and he has 3 bullets that are still inside him. And when I asked Colin about what he thought we should be doing, he said, I'm not here because of what happened to me. I'm here because of what happened to me keeps happening to other people, and we have to do something about it. Colin, we will. Colin, I promise you, we will. This is our intention. We must do what we can now. And there's no person who is more committed to acting on this moral obligation we have than the President of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, President Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Please have a seat. Good afternoon, everybody.
Let me begin by thanking our Vice President, Joe Biden, for your dedication, Joe, to this issue, for bringing so many different voices to the table, because while reducing gun violence is a complicated challenge, protecting our children from harm shouldn't be a divisive one. Over the month since the tragedy in Newtown, we've heard from so many, and obviously none have affected us more than the families of those gorgeous children and their teachers and guardians who were lost. And so we're grateful to all of you for taking the time to be here and recognizing that we honor their memories, in part by doing everything we can to prevent this from happening again. But we also heard from some unexpected people. In particular, I started getting a lot of letters from kids. 4 of them are here today: Grant Fritz, Julia Stokes, Hina Ziha, and Tasia Good. They're pretty representative of some of the messages that I got. These are some pretty smart letters from some pretty smart young people. Hina, a 3rd grader. You can go ahead and wave, Hina. That's you. Hina wrote, "I feel terrible for the parents who lost their children. I love my country, and I want everybody to be happy and safe." And then Grant, go ahead and wave, Grant. Grant said, "I think there should be some changes. We should learn from what happened at Sandy Hook. I feel really bad." And then Julia said, Julia, where are you? There you go. "I'm not scared for my safety, I'm scared for others. I have 4 brothers and sisters, and I know I would not be able to bear the thought of losing any of them." And these are our kids. This is what they're thinking about. And so what we should be thinking about is our responsibility to care for them and shield them from harm and give them the tools they need to grow up and do everything that they're capable of doing, not just to pursue their own dreams, but to help build this country. This is our first task as a society, keeping our children safe. This is how we will be judged. And their voices should compel us to change. And that's why last month I asked Joe to lead an effort, along with members of my cabinet, to come up with some concrete steps we can take right now to keep our children safe, to help prevent mass shootings, to reduce the broader epidemic of gun violence in this country. And we can't put this off any longer. Just last Thursday, as TV networks were covering one of Joe's meetings on this topic, news broke of another school shooting, this one in California. In the month since 20 precious children and 6 brave adults were violently taken from us at Sandy Hook Elementary, more than 900 of our fellow Americans have reportedly died at the end of a gun. 900 in the past month. And every day we wait, that number will keep growing. So I'm putting forward a specific set of proposals based on the work of Joe's task force. And in the days ahead, I intend to use whatever weight this office holds to make them a reality. Because while there is no law or set of laws that can prevent every senseless act of violence completely, no piece of legislation that will prevent every tragedy, every act of evil, if there's even one thing we can do to reduce this violence, if there's even one life that can be saved, then we've got an obligation to try. And I'm going to do my part. As soon as I'm finished speaking here, I will sit at that desk and I will sign a directive giving law enforcement, schools, mental health professionals, and the public health community some of the tools they need to help reduce gun violence. We will make it easier to keep guns out of the hands of criminals by strengthening the background check system. We will help schools hire more resource officers if they want them, and develop emergency preparedness plans. We will make sure mental health professionals know their options for reporting threats of violence, even as we acknowledge that someone with a mental illness is far more likely to be a victim of violent crime than the perpetrator. And while year after year, those who oppose even modest gun safety measures have threatened to defund scientific or medical research into the causes of gun violence, I will direct the Centers for Disease Control to go ahead and study the best ways to reduce it. And Congress should fund research into the effects that violent video games have on young minds. We don't benefit from ignorance. We don't benefit from not knowing the science of this epidemic of violence. Now, these are a few of the 23 executive actions that I'm announcing today. But as important as these steps are, they are in no way a substitute for action from members of Congress. To make a real and lasting difference, Congress too must act. And Congress must act soon. And I'm calling on Congress to pass some very specific proposals right away. First, it's time for Congress to require a universal background check for anyone trying to buy a gun. The law already requires licensed gun dealers to run background checks, and over the last 14 years, that's kept 1.5 million of the wrong people from getting their hands on a gun. But it's hard to enforce that law when as many as 40% of all gun purchases are conducted without a background check. That's not safe, that's not smart, it's not fair to responsible gun buyers or sellers. If you want to buy a gun, whether it's from a licensed dealer or a private seller, you should at least have to show you are not a felon or somebody legally prohibited from buying one. This is common sense. And an overwhelming majority of Americans agree with us on the need for universal background checks, including more than 70% of the National Rifle Association's members, according to one survey. So there's no reason we can't do this. Second, Congress should restore a ban on military-style assault weapons and a 10-round limit for magazines. The type of assault rifle used in Aurora, for example, when paired with high-capacity magazines, has one purpose: to pump out as many bullets as possible, as quickly as possible, to do as much damage, using bullets often designed to inflict maximum damage. And that's what allowed the gunman in Aurora to shoot 70 people. 70 people, killing 12 in a matter of minutes. Weapons designed for the theater of war have no place in a movie theater. A majority of Americans agree with us on this. And by the way, so did Ronald Reagan, one of the staunchest defenders of the Second Amendment, who wrote to Congress in 1994 urging them, this is Ronald Reagan speaking, urging them to listen to the American public and to the law enforcement community and support a ban on the further manufacture of military-style assault weapons. And finally, Congress needs to help rather than hinder law enforcement as it does its job. We should get tougher on people who buy guns with the express purpose of turning around and selling them to criminals. And we should severely punish anybody who helps them do this. Since Congress hasn't confirmed a director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in 6 years, they should confirm Todd Jones, who will be who has been acting and I will be nominating for the post. And at a time when budget cuts are forcing many communities to reduce their police force, we should put more cops back on the job and back on our streets. Now, let me be absolutely clear. Like most Americans, I believe the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to bear arms. I respect our strong tradition of gun ownership and the rights of hunters and sportsmen. There are millions of responsible, law-abiding gun owners in America who cherish their right to bear arms for hunting or sport or protection or collection. I also believe most gun owners agree that we can respect the Second Amendment while keeping an irresponsible, law-breaking few from inflicting harm on a massive scale. I believe most of them agree that if America worked harder to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, there would be fewer atrocities like the one that occurred in Newtown. That's what these reforms are designed to do. They're common sense measures. They have the support of the majority of the American people. And yet, that doesn't mean any of this is going to be easy to enact or implement. If it were, we'd already have universal background checks. The ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines never would have been allowed to expire. More of our fellow
All right, the left marches on with its plan to take away your Second Amendment rights, and unfortunately, they are one step closer. Earlier today, the Senate Judiciary Committee passed a controversial ban on assault weapons. Now, not surprisingly, the measure passed along party lines, and the discussion about the ban got very heated at times. Now, it even erupted into a fierce exchange between Texas Senator Ted Cruz and the bill's sponsor, California Senator Dianne Feinstein. Now, watch what happened when Cruz challenged the constitutionality of the ban.
Would she think that the Fourth Amendment's protection against searches and seizures could properly apply only to the following specified individuals and not to the individuals that Congress has deemed outside the protection of the Bill of Rights?
I'm not a sixth grader. Senator, I've been on this committee for 20 years. It's fine you want to lecture me on the Constitution. I appreciate it. Just know I've been here for a long time. I've passed on a number of bills. I've studied the Constitution myself. I am reasonably well educated, and I thank you for the lecture. Incidentally, this does not prohibit, you use the word prohibit, it exempts 2,271 weapons. Isn't that enough for the people in the United States?
Nobody doubts her sincerity or her passion. And yet, at the same time, I would note that she chose not to answer the question that I asked, which is, in her judgment, would it be consistent with the Constitution for Congress to specify which books are permitted and which books are not, and to use the specific number?
The answer is obvious, no.
All right, joining me now, someone who has been very outspoken about the left's gun grab, author, columnist, Coulter. How are you?
Fine.
I don't even need to say Ann. Everybody knows who you are. You know, I felt like I was listening to Cruz. I felt like I was listening to a Supreme Court argument because he's talking about, all right, well, the First Amendment, does that mean that you're going to ban some books, not other books? How do you justify it? The Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. I thought he made a really good case, and she got pissed.
Yeah, he asked some very important questions, and Dianne Feinstein, like her other I am woman, hear me roar, Democratic female, Hillary Clinton, as soon as they get a question they don't like, they start crying. Oh, that's fantastic. I would like to see how that would go over in a law school class when a professor asks you to distinguish cases. I have been very educated, and I'm offended by that question. I spend half my life
near the Constitution.
On college campuses with co-eds at the mic crying to me and stamping their feet and telling me they're offended. It's going to be harder for me to tell them now that's not an answer, now that U.S. senators are using that as an answer. And what Dianne Feinstein eventually got to answering was preposterous. She said he raised the First Amendment. And she said, well, we ban child pornography. The very answer proves the absurdity of what is happening. The First Amendment protects speech. It does not protect photographs. It certainly does not protect photographs of genitals. If we interpreted the Second Amendment, which protects arms, the way we interpreted the First Amendment, you would have a right to your own personal nuclear weapon. That's how extreme it is. And I would add that, in fact, the First Amendment does protect virtual child pornography. It certainly protects writing about child pornography. And for her to say, well, don't worry, we're not banning these other guns. Well, okay, how about we just ban the New York Times? Because we still have the Daily News and the New York Post.
Good point. And that's what Cruz was getting to, about the First Amendment side of his argument, which was, I thought, very, very pertinent and clever and appropriate.
He nailed her, so she said, I'm offended.
Yeah, I'm offended. And, all right. So
no, I used to think women just shouldn't be able to vote. Now I think at least liberal women should not be able to hold office. And by woman, I do not mean to limit that to the biological sense. That is not an answer. All right. I'm offended.
All right. First of all, you know what frustrates me? Nobody knows about these weapons. I have been trained in the use of firearms since I am 11. I know I've shot most of them. And the point is, you know, Joe Biden is lecturing, well, just fire a shotgun through a door, not knowing what's on the other side, which is stupid. Secondly, a lot of shotguns have a big kickback that would probably send you flying right on your backside. Now, an AR-15 would not do that.
Right. No, you need different guns for different things. But, I mean, you remind me of this. I keep hearing them say, we deserve to at least have a discussion. We want to have a discussion. Every time you try to have a discussion with them, they become hysterical, they cry, and they want to show pictures of dead children as if our position is, oh, we don't mind a few dead children. No, our position is concealed carry would have stopped these slaughters, and we have the statistics and the studies to back it up. Something else I saw you talking about last night on TV that I think is very important to clarify. This nonsense idea by people who do know absolutely nothing about guns and nothing about criminology that a gun in the home is more likely to be used against the occupant.
True.
Okay, point one, and I have been through some of this before, that is 100% suicides. And there is no higher rate of suicide than with a gun or without a gun. People use poison or a million other things. But the idea that a criminal would be wrestling a gun away from the homeowner is preposterous. That happens even in attempts where the homeowner gets shot by the home invader. It happens in less than 1% of the cases. They have done extensive interviews with prisoners. They say they do not go into homes they think could have a gun. They will not mug someone they think will have a gun. If they see a homeowner with a gun, they run. It is only in Hollywood movies that the criminal sees the gun and wrestles you for it. There are plenty of other houses to break into and rape women in.
All right, you're going to CPAC.
Yes, I am.
All right, we're going to show highlights in a little bit. We got Rubio, you got Rand Paul, you got Ted Cruz, who we just saw, you got Mike Lee. We got a new and of course you are a rock star.
Wow.
You're going to bring the house down.
That's the big highlights.
That's listen.
So get ready to replay that on Monday.
All right. So, but the point is, we've got an emerging, energetic. We got new blood. I'm energized by them. I think this is really helping the party, and the media hates all of them. Yes. So, I mean, that's a good sign. That means they're doing their job.
Whereas I only hate about a third of them.
Yeah,
none of the ones you mentioned. I'm speaking right before Cruz, who is the big finale speaker on Saturday.
Yeah. You get to introduce them?
No, I'm not very good at introductions. I'm much better at making fun of liberals.
Yeah, no, by the way, if you haven't seen Ann speak, you are funny.
Thank you.
Oh, good. You do great. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
And still.
Over the years, people have come to Tennessee to bring life to their dreams. Generations of families have made our state rich in heritage and values. Artists have made it the musical heart of the nation. And the abiding faith of its people have given it compassion and strength. In 2000, something vital was taken from Tennessee. The Tennessee Supreme Court ruled that our state's Constitution was more liberal toward abortion than the U.S. Constitution. This has subsequently taken away the right of the people of Tennessee to enforce reasonable regulation of the abortion industry. We can't require that abortion facilities be licensed or inspected by the health department, and so half are not. And there's nothing to prevent the same court from imposing mandatory taxpayer funding of abortion. Now Tennessee is an abortion destination, with women from neighboring states accounting for 1 out of every 4 abortions here. Amendment 1 will restore the right of the people of Tennessee to enact meaningful protections for women and the unborn. And it can restore Tennessee as a place where people come to bring life to their dreams. Vote yes on Amendment 1 and restore life to Tennessee.
Developing now, 2 soldiers are shot at a National Guard armory in Tennessee, Millington, Tennessee, north of Memphis. Both are hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. The shooter is a member of the National Guard as well and is in custody. Details still coming to us. The lockdown at Naval Support Activity South has been lifted. The gunman, yet to be identified, had been relieved, authorities say, of his duties as a Navy recruiter. A small handgun was used here. The shooter quickly apprehended by other National Guard members. 2 victims being treated. Both are National Guard employees.
We treat them all as life-threatening right now until we can get them to the med and get them stabilized, in particular with gunshot wounds. Each victim was shot 1 time with one gunshot wound each.
One of the victims was shot in the foot, another in the leg. Today's shooting comes a month after 13 people were killed in an attack at the Naval Yard in Washington, D.C. That's it from the Live Desk. Now back to you.
The Tennessee Constitution is special. We have some of the strongest privacy protections in the country. Privacy is something we take very seriously. But Amendment 1 would strip away some basic privacy rights and force governmental interference into private medical decisions. And 1 opens the door for the legislature to take away additional rights, including marriage and child-rearing rights. Amendment 1 is government interference with far-reaching consequences on thousands of laws. It is deeply flawed. We should all vote no.